kind of creative dynamo. But then I met her and I realized that Sabrina is a creative dynamo. And so I'm very excited to have her here today. Really sings the song of her city, and people around the world hear it and feel it, and really want to welcome Sabrina Nelson. Thank you for joining us today, Sabrina.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you so much. You know, it's so funny. You're like, I've heard of, I was like, me? You heard of me? So it's kind of nice. And I'm like, well, no, me, really? Really? I really appreciate you and Drake especially for asking me to do this, because it gives me an opportunity as I sit up in my perch, the top of my house, looking out of my window at the magnolia tree, and just looking at how beautiful this picture is, and how anxious or nervous I feel about going out in this pandemic time. And only because I just know people who have died. You know, I don't think I was as afraid before until I knew people who have died. And they weren't all over 70 and, you know, vulnerable and all those other things. So the last time I was in my physical studio, I was nesting, if you would. And I cleaned it up, and I had a Virgo moment. And for me, I'm born in late August, so I have Leo tendencies, but I have Virgo moments. And my Leo tendencies is always wanting to be in control of everything around me. And
I know those Leos.
The reality is I have no control. And so I pretend to have control by putting things in order. And that gives me great comfort in my Virgo soul. So I was in the studio, and I had just taken down my work from a one-person show at Madonna University. So I had all these pieces that I had to deliver to people who had purchased, but also physical pieces from installations that I had to take apart. So I was putting them in their spaces. And so I live as a person in a house full of installations, whether it's my clothes, my jewelry, my makeup, my food. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see food installations daily. If it ain't pretty, if it ain't organized a certain way, I can't eat it. And so that is how I live. And so I don't know if you guys want to start off with a set of questions, or should I just go right into the talk and then allow participants to ask questions, or how do you want to?
Well, let's set you up a little bit here, because I think there's some very important things about your background that I hear you speak of quite a bit, and specifically beginning with your basic origins. I think it's very important for people to understand. You were born in 1967. Very pivotal.
I say 1967.
1967. That's right. Very pivotal year in America and world, and particularly in Detroit. And I think there is a certain perspective that you bring, being what we might call a 70s baby in a sense. Can you take us back to that kind of time and what it means?
Well, I was born in 67, but I was raised and reared and fed in the 70s. And in the 70s, it was a time when folks were coming back from Vietnam. It was a time after the rebellion where Detroit, there were two communities, and there was a division. And there was obviously a Black community and a white community. I don't know if the other groups mattered as much, but I was in the Black community, so that's what I know about. My mother, definitely a rebellion in her being, and me being born 23 days after the rebellion. And I'm sure it probably made me who I am, based on watching and becoming who I am, or who I was meant to be. And so, you know, not necessarily always following the right path. And I call myself bass backwards, because not a you know, how babies come out the wrong way. I just feel like I didn't fit in the box in a perfect way. Like I was a witnesser, I was a recorder, and not necessarily a regurgitator of things, but just watching people around me and growing up in a rebellious time where my mother was very young and she wore an afro and she wasn't straightening her hair and she was down. We used to go to the mosque one. She used to take us there to eat. So this is Ramadan. And even though I am not Muslim, I remember going to the mosque with my mother. And Mosque One was actually ran by Malcolm X when he was in Detroit. And so that was part of my mother's community. And so we went there. We were very close to 12th Street in Linwood. And so I grew up in a real Black neighborhood, and there weren't any whites there. And if they were, they kind of left their whiteness wherever they were. And so everybody in my neighborhood was Black. And everybody was like walking around, like when you greeted each other, it was like Black Power and Gawa, you know, so it was just that neighborhood. And so that part of the rebellion, that part of the you're for your people, you got to look out for everybody. The neighborhood was still a neighborhood. It wasn't a hood. Like the barber lived on the corner who cut your mother's hair for her prom, or the beautician or the teacher lived around the corner. And if you did something down the street, you got a spanking by Mrs. Jenkins, and then you got a spanking by Mrs. Thomas, and then you got a whooping when you got home because everybody knew you. And so that's when everybody was responsible for each other. But then when heroin came in after Vietnam vets came back, the neighborhoods just went away. I'm sure the rebellion helped that too, you know, with the burning of the properties and all of that. It just pushed people away. And so
I know you talked quite a bit extensively about the kind of handing down generationally in your family, from your grandmother to your mother and so on. Do you think this has helped formulate? Because when we start getting into the work, I see a lot of this concept of recording, sharing with other generations, and just as we're doing now, kind of talking, reliving experiences. Is this something when you were growing up, you got this, you feel like you got it naturally? You observed?
Yeah, well, I definitely want to say that I grew up in a house with, my family's from Alabama and Georgia and Mississippi.
Right, Alabama, that makes sense.
So I grew up in a house where my great grandmother was in the house. I was in the house with my grandmother and my mother. So they were the Holy Trinity, if you would. So my introduction to art was not painting and drawing. It was watching them make clothes, because she was part of the Eastern Star. And going to those meetings and just being quiet and watching these, you know, just not really watching, but witnessing these things happen. And so because my great grandmother was in the house, she was in her 70s when I was a little person, and she was the youngest of 15 children. And because all of her nieces and nephews would come by, and then she would have communion from the Baptist church. My grandmother was very active and beautiful, and so she was also very social. So people would always come by the house and gather and fellowship, if you would. And so in that particular time, I grew up in the house where children were to be seen and not heard. And because my great grandmother was so big in the church, it was sort of like Sister, you know, McKinney, or either Aunt McKinney or Aunt Tiny or Aunt Magnolia is what they called her. We called her Mama. And so we just had to be quiet and just be witnesses, if you would. And so there was a lot of things that were made in the house. Like they didn't buy art, they didn't buy clothes, they made everything. And there was a lot of gatherings that would happen either at the house or at different places. But me just watching was the way that I learned how to work with my hands, because I would get the scraps from my grandmother. And, you know, I would make things, and they would be dolls' clothes, paper dolls. I was drawing everything because I had to be quiet. And so my voice became a visual voice, but the term artist was never used in the house, you know, or going to the museum, that wasn't a thing. You went to, you know, the cabaret things, or either you went to the family reunion or you went to this funeral. And those were social gatherings because my great grandmother was in the house and she was the youngest of 15 children. So somebody was always dying. And then you would get dressed up, or you would make your garment and you would decorate yourself to greet these family members, or either they would come over to the house afterwards, you know. And so, because she was one of the elders, and that just became a part of my life almost every weekend. And so I think that, you know, becoming who I am, the way that I present myself, the way that I deal with students and people and creativity, is just the way that I was raised.
I share that experience with you in terms of my mother being a seamstress. And it was my job to clean up after her. And so I watched her create the process, or her processes. And then I would clean up. And then you talk about the shards of material laying around. And that was my thing, and all these different colors. And I was just entranced by this. And I can see how that kind of develops over a while, how it really impacts the creative process. Yeah, absolutely. So I know you got a lot of stuff to share with us. Should we move in that direction?
I can. Let me see how to share my screen. Forgot how, Drake. What do I do?
There's a little green button.
Oh yeah, there it is. It even says it. How about that? Remember that? Fundamental. All right, let me start off here. Let's go here. Let's go to my slideshow. And let's go from the beginning. All right, can you guys see that? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Hey, remain creative by any means necessary. As I just talked about, the whole, for sure, going to Mosque One to get free food with my mother. One of the funny things is that when I was a little girl, we would drive to Alabama because there was too many of us to fly often. And as I said, my great grandmother was the 15th child of the family. So she was one of the matriarchs in the family. And we would often go to Alabama for family reunions. And so when I would get down south, our names would change, right? And so in Detroit, I was Sabrina. And I was Little Red. Little Red, you know, and everybody knew, you know, whose family you were based on where you would stay when you would get down south. So, you know, they would call me Little Red or Detroit Red. And nobody in Alabama says Detroit. They say Detroit, right? So they call me Little Red. And, you know, I kind of took on to that. And so understanding how my mother loved Malcolm in our house and how he wasn't a bad person in our house. And if you haven't seen that Netflix series on Who Killed Malcolm X, watch it. That's all I want to say. So I was born in the year of 67, and this is Linwood. The rebellion took place over in the area that my family lived in. Linwood, 12th Street. We lived off of Hollingwood and Dexter and Elmhurst. And, you know, you can look at the maps. We were definitely in the neighborhoods where it took place. And I'm sure, I just remember my grandmother laughing at the fact that, you know, when a lot of the stuff was happening, my mother was running down the street with lamps and shit. So she had a game in her game. You know, I think I still got a lamp that my mama took. And so the idea of just kind of like, you know, standing your ground and saying, you know, we're tired of this and this is how we're going to be. And my mother was definitely that black sheep. She was not straightening her hair. She was not trying to go out and get no job for the man. She was, you know, she was one of those people that was definitely Ungawa Black Power, wore her afro, put her fist up high, and her babies was behind her. And she was an interesting person. My birth mother died in 1979, so I was 12. And she was definitely the black sheep, you know, just doing stuff that my grandmother and my great grandmother didn't like. And so my mother would take us often to peace marches. She would take us to the mosque, and, you know, they was all down for Dr. Martin Luther King, but Malcolm X was like trouble. So my mom was definitely on that path. This is the Sabrina from 1972.
Oh.
Right. And I didn't smile with my teeth, with my lips open, because I had just lost my first tooth and I was embarrassed. But this is, you know, I wanted my afro to be as big as my mom's, and she wetted and picked it out, and it just didn't look like hers. But I was real happy to go to school that day because it was picture day, right? And so people, 1972, and I think about, when I look at this picture, to thine own self be true, based on Shakespeare, like I was an authentic, you know, kid of the rebellion. Like I was following behind my mama, who was like, let's go over here. And this is Little Red, you know. And when I look at this picture, I think of the Henry David Thoreau, all good things are wild and free, you know, because I didn't have any worries. I didn't think about what was happening in terms of folks coming back from Vietnam and my neighborhood being destroyed. I just wanted to just make stuff and laugh and do cartwheels and draw. This, the person who had wonder still in her eyes. And I remember this day. I remember sitting still, and I remember them telling me to sit up straight and look into the camera and smile. And my grandmother was like, well, why didn't you show your teeth? And what's really interesting is I looked at a book, Dr. Robert Ferris Thompson's book, Flash of the Spirit, and it talks about how showing your teeth, people don't take you seriously. And I kind of like the fact that I didn't do that on here. This is the Sabrina who was in her probably first year of college. And I'm skipping from that kindergarten child, 1972, to this one. This was probably 1987. I had just had Mario, who is now, he'll be 33. And I was a non-traditional student. So I didn't go right to art college after high school because I had not had art in my whole probably middle school and high school career. The last time I had art was in the 5th grade. And so I was so hungry for it when I applied to the art college here that I was just like, damn, I can go to art school to be what I already am. Because I was already drawing, I was already making clothes. I was making clothes actually before I was drawing. I was making clothes, doing hair, doing nails. I was doing the artist hustle. And in my neighborhood, it was a creative hustle so I could make money because I was in the 10th grade. So for me, it was just a way of living, but it was also a way to make money so I didn't have to ask anybody for money. And so I had a car, I had a kid. I could finish high school in the 11th grade, but I chose to stay so I could walk with my friends that I started with. And I realized when I left my home high school in Detroit Public Schools that I was really brilliant, but it was too many people and too much noise for me to realize that. And when I went to the maternity school, I was sitting amongst all these girls who their parents were trying to hide them in this school that was, because there was a majority white students there with me from the suburbs and a few girls from the city, but it was on the southwest side of Detroit. And I'm sitting in this room and I'm the only.
Which Sabrina, a lot of people don't know who are not near Detroit, that's a historically a heavily populated Latino area of the town.
Yeah, and it was pretty large Latino community then too, but I would have to take the bus across town to get there because I didn't have my car yet. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I went to the school and I was the only 10th grader in the whole school. Now you had the option because my grandmother and my aunt worked for the state of Michigan Social Services. They gave me the option. They were like, well, do you want to have this baby? Do you want to give your child up for adoption? And this was after my birth mother had died. So this was in 81 and I had Denise in 82. And I was like, no, you know, because I was going to church and I was thinking, you know, this is obviously something from God, and it just gives me an opportunity to be the mother that I wish I had. And so for me, they were like, you can live here and then give your baby up for adoption and nobody has to know. And I was like, that's not what I'm doing. I'm going to have this baby and I'm going to do whatever I need to do with this baby. And so I went to the school and I'm the only 10th grader there. And I realized in a class of seniors and juniors, and then there was somebody younger than me that I just was dogging out, like, how you having sex? You ain't even grown, because I'm grown, right? Right, you know, in society, you always gotta dog out somebody. But that usually shows that you're dealing with your own insecurities. So in there, I'm realizing they're asking all these questions and I know these answers, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. And then I'm starting to read and I'm starting to study and I'm starting to not have all the noise that I had in my regular high school. And I was just incredibly distracted. And then I realized, well, God damn it, I'm smart, you know? And then I started really enjoying learning. And that's where my desire for learning came in the maternity school. And I was getting all these A's. And then when I went back to the general population, I was like, yeah, you know, I didn't realize all of the noise that was around me was keeping me from learning. So I just got really hungry for things and I started studying music. I started studying poetry and I started really getting into the idea of artistry. So acting, dancing, music, all of that was like super, it was just like my ability to learn just blew up for some reason when I got pregnant. And when I got into this school, and then after I had the baby, I refused to be what I thought society said young pregnant Black girls would be. Like, you have to drop out of school. You can't do this. You have to get married. And I was like, I ain't doing none of that shit. What I'm gonna do is me and my baby, we gonna go to school and I'm gonna be brilliant and she going everywhere I go and I'm gonna prove y'all wrong. And so when I met Gilda, she was like, you got 2 babies? And you ain't even, I was like, yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. And of course, the college that I was attending at the time I work for now, but the college was called Center for Creative Studies, which I didn't even realize was in the city because they didn't come to my high school to recruit. It's a predominantly white institution. So when I got in there, there was no one who looked like they came from where I came from. So when I met Gilda, I was like, okay. And so I was always in her office asking questions because I felt like, even though I was my school, when I got to this school, people were talking and they were speaking Japanese. And I'm like, how does everybody in the room know what they're talking about except for me? And so I would always ask her, like, what does this mean? And so I was constantly like walking around with like dictionaries, encyclopedias, books in the library because I wanted to know. So Gilda was a source of.
Okay, there you go. I was just going to ask. Gilda's a very significant person. I just wanted to make sure we know who she is.
Yeah, Gilda Snowden was, you know, for me, a source of information. She, I started CCS in '87. She was assigned to me as my mentor and there for 30 years. And she taught me how to search for myself. And so I was always asking questions because I was like, well, I don't know what they're talking about. And so after classes, I would go to her and I felt like, I mean, her office was chaotic, but I felt like she was brilliant. She was an expressive, introspective painter. She painted her fears. She painted her dreams. She was an assemblage artist. So she put things together and she's a colorist. And so she was a super, positive, happy person who often, once we got in her office door, would spill the tea and just tell me stuff just like I needed to hear it. And so she was a curator and she was also a womanist. There were parts of Gilda that I felt was very feminist-like, but I was coming from a canon of living in a house with 3 women. So those were my holy trinity. And so those were the voices that I was attracted to. And not to say that the men weren't there, but they weren't as significant in my family. And so when I started to produce artwork, it was always from a perspective of myself. I was doing a lot of self-portraits, ingress, was one of the artists, Rembrandt. So I was following the traditional European canon, and then got to the point probably in my second year where I was like, where the Black artists at? You know, how come ain't no brothers on the wall? And I would go to the builder's office and I'd be like, you know, I've been in 2 art history classes and we ain't really talking about no Black artists. And Gilda was like, well, you need to really do your research yourself. So she kind of forced me to, well, she invited me to a couple of openings where there were Black galleries. And then I met collectors, and one in particular, Ed Littlejohn, was over the law department at Wayne State University, which is a large university that's in the urban center of the city. He gave me a collection of books. And then when those artists would come to town, either to the Nnamdi Gallery or the Sherry Washington Gallery, these were Black-owned, Black-run galleries, mostly showing predominantly Black artists, I would go and I would help at the reception serving food, and I would meet them. I would meet Richard Mayhew. I would meet Benny Andrews. I would meet Emma Amos and Samela Lewis and Jacob Lawrence, who came to the city, and Elizabeth Catlett. And so I started meeting these folks, and I was like, damn, we ain't the only Black ones. You know, so I got excited, and then I started really looking for them. And then I, like many artists, like Titus Kaphar, talks about being upset, you know, in his undergrad program, or I don't know if it was undergrad or Yale, but not seeing in the art history classes them covering African-American art. And in my senior year, I had a meltdown. You know, we had one day before our last final, and they hadn't shown any Black artists. And the only Black artist that my professor talked about was Basquiat. And when he showed Jean-Michel Basquiat's slide, he was like, well, here's a Black artist. And he didn't say Black, he said African-American, and he's really Haitian-American. But he said, here's an African-American artist. He died of an overdose. Here's his work. And I was like, oh, I'm leaving. You know, so I walked out of the class and I went to Gilda's studio office, and I was like, okay, this motherfucker is crazy. I'm mad. I need to know about some, this is our last class before finals. I'm a senior, and it's just me and you and Lester Johnson and, you know, one other professor that I'm not sure if he's really Black or not. I'm not sure. And Gilda was like, listen, you can't tell somebody how to teach their class. We are just professing what we know. She said, what you can do is you can gather your information, you can put it in the library, and if anybody wants to use it, they can. Or you can teach the class yourself.
So, Sabrina, I just want to say, you know, and I know what a significant figure Gilda is, and I'm glad you explained that to us, and I'm glad you're about to get into some of your pieces. Since we've been sitting here, somebody just texted me a picture. One of your collectors just texted me a picture of them and their daughter standing in front of one of your pieces. So what I want to see is if you could go. We've been here for about half an hour, so I want to let's go through some of your works and have you just show the range of styles and works that you do and some of the things that you do. We talk about Blackbird, and then I'm also going to play when we get to Blackbird. I got a little surprise for the audience and for yourself. And then I'm also going to show the pictures that was just sent to me, so I think it's really a great.
I'm excited to see the picture too, Drake.
Okay.
So I don't have many pieces from the time I was at CCS. A lot of those I left in my ex's home, but I was doing these really large oil paintings, and they were figurative. And they were on canvas, stretched canvas, and they were portraits. And so this is a series that I had started working on after I left CCS, and this is a paper quilt. It is on vintage wallpaper. I was given like 100 rolls of vintage wallpaper somebody donated to me, and I just wanted to play with the idea of prayer, meditation, and pattern. And so this one is called Standing in the Need of Prayer, and this will show you the scale. But because my first introduction to art was sewing, I like the idea of piercing paper. I started looking at different communities that would pierce their skin, and just thinking about folks from the continent and how, you know, that design based on their religion or their practice, cultural practice, could be infused in what I was doing. So looking at the whole Yoruba faith and kind of getting away from the fundamentalist faith that I was kind of reared in my household with, but also looking at the idea that my mother was not this practicing, going to church every Sunday kind of person, but my grandmother and great-grandmother were. So I was sort of in a divided house spiritually. My mother was really into the practice of just kind of going where, you know, the whole traditional African religion came from. So this is looking at Verve, the voodoo, or the Yoruba religion, and tying it in. So this is called In Your Belly, There Are Many Nations. And so you'll see the whole collage using the satin bags as the tarp used to put prayers, or I would just say sacred papers. So I was using calligraphy, I was still sewing. So these things are actually stitched onto the paper and drawing. And this is paste paint. And so I'm just into coloring, and I could see Gilda's influence in this as well. Here's another one where I was looking at artists like Leroy Foster or Charles White, those artists that were known as draftsmen, looking at Elizabeth Catlett's drawings, and then getting more and more into the idea of iconography, religious iconography, but also where my Black voice is in it, and going into the shrine of the Black Madonna to look at the painting that was done by Mr. Dowdell. That is a very famous painting here in Detroit. So this is a very large piece too, about the size of Standing in the Need of Prayer. And I, again, was doing these really large pieces with doilies, patterns, and then textures on these papers. So this one is called Lily in the Valley. And this is my now 19-year-old who was kind of laying down with this lace dress, and I wanted it to be as if she was floating. But every time I use flowers or plants or some type of vegetation, I usually do the research. And so the lily of the valley is a symbol of chastity, purity, happiness, and humility. And I wanted to say that here. And for the first piece where it's Standing in the Need of Prayer, I'm talking about being still in the midst of all of the chaos that happens when you live in the middle of a city like Detroit. And so just remaining still and listening to whatever the spirit has to tell you. This is another one from that series. And this one is called Supination Warrior. This is my son-in-law, and his name, Bomani, means warrior. And so it's just talking about being vulnerable when you're in prayer. And again, bringing back that whole idea of Mosque One, and studying religions just to see where I am. I don't know if you saw the movie Life of Pi, where the 12-year-old is looking for spirituality and trying to figure out which direction to go. And I found myself like that from probably 11 to 12 years old, asking my great-grandmother questions, my grandmother questions, and my mother questions, like, well, why do they do this? And then being in a family of drummers with Sundiata Keita is my mother's third cousin. So those folks hanging out, and he had been to the continent and brought his religion back to the family, and just trying to find my voice in that. So this is the throne, doing a lot of collages and being excited about doing them because I was sewing onto the paper. And often you find I would leave thread and needles just hanging. So it was a mapping like Julie Metaru's, where you could see where the last place I touched because the needle would hang. And so that was an ode to my grandmother, if you would, and my great-grandmother, for those who make. You know, people call them folk artists or zeitgeist artists. And I just think it's a very important part of creative community in the Black community. So I wanted to make sure I had images from Elizabeth Catlett and her drawings, her sculpture. I think she was an amazing artist. And so her son lived here in Detroit. And I was always looking at her work when I started my career as a student, and just going, damn, she went through a lot. And her family was also from Alabama. connection. This is a really bad image, but I was always looking at Charles White's drawings and Bigger's drawings and trying to not necessarily mimic, but just be like, damn, you know, like this was exciting to me more so than painting was when I make marks. So when you're looking at my drawings, you'll see that I am coming from the canon of those artists who were from the 60s or the Harlem Renaissance period, and looking at how they were able to kind of big up their community with their marks. And so I'm a drawer, artist, painter, installation artist because I love making marks. So this was one called Gildabird, and you can't really see it, but the coils of her hair inside the coils, and I would spend hours just kind of drawing these meditations. They looked like tornadoes. And Gilda would draw these tornadoes because she was afraid of them and they were in her dreams. And so this was my ode to her, but it also became more of a meditation, if you would. I also got into doing a lot of installations because I was not satisfied with just making marks or painting on canvas. An installation gave me an opportunity to have a real great feel for placement and how to change a space viscerally by being given that space, but also changing that space. And so this was an old elevator shoot that an exhibition gave me, and they were like, do with it what you will. And I wanted to create a space in honor of a woman named Mary Laredo, who was Mexican from Laredo, Texas, who came to Detroit probably like most folks did for the automotive industry. And I found in this building a huge box of old Chrysler keys that were not cut, and fabric and thread. And so she was a flamenco dancer, but she also made sculptural pieces that had sound. So out of the elevator shoot, I had my song, Why You Wanna Fly Blackbird, was actually recorded and coming from the top. And then you could hear the shoes. I also had a recording of flamenco dancers' shoes that was moving. So I wanted to create movement with sound more so than with image. So these were the keys, coins from a belly skirt. And this, you could also see, I used a bird stencil because she was also a blackbird for me. And so not really talking about someone who had lost their child, but she lost her battle with cancer. And so for me, she was definitely a blackbird.
Can you, Sabrina,
Close.
a moment to talk about the significance of the blackbird as a symbolic?
I would think for me, yes, the significance of the blackbird, or the bird as a metaphor for me, is because I grew up in a house with these black birds, my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mother. And the song itself by Nina Simone says, why you wanna fly blackbird, you ain't never gonna fly. Your daddy's name, your mama's name was sorrow and your daddy's name was pain. And just thinking about how folks in very poor communities are not seen and not often, they often have to go through life in a very just sad way. And so I had lost my blackbird in '79, my mother. And so for me, when I use the blackbird as a metaphor for women of color, I am thinking of, I use the crow and the raven. And in mythology, these are birds of messengers. They bring messages to you from the past or the future, depending on which cultural group is talking about them. But a grouping of crows is called a murder of crows. And a grouping of ravens is called an unkindness or a conspiracy. And looking these things up, based on that particular song, I hadn't thought about the theme that I am working with now, which is mothers who lose their children to violent death. But I was always using the bird, that particular bird, in my work because I wanted to talk about Black women.
And Sabrina.
Yeah.
I know you sent me, and I asked you about the Nina Simone version, but you actually one up me when you sent me the version that you did over. So I'm gonna just play a quick snippet for everybody, just because I thought it was really cool. In fact, I wasn't really looking. I was like, Sabrina can't sing. You know, I just didn't think you could, because you know, because you're a talented artist, visual artist. I just felt like it would just be like a spoil of riches if you could sing.
There's a cap to the.
And you know what?
To the
I was pleasantly surprised. So let me. I want to just play. Oh, you know what? Your screen is on, so we can't play right now. So just keep on with yours, and if we can play it at the end. If not, I'll just send it out to everybody.
Okay, we could definitely. I'm gonna go really fast. So this is Mary, and that particular song was being played along with some flamenco shoes that were tapping, and then these are some shots. But as I was doing my gallery shows, I also work at the Museum of Art. And they gave me this room, which is, it was a really high ceiling room, and they painted the wall chalk, and they said, we need you to do anything to engage the community that comes in, particularly the young folks. So I started doing these very large chalk drawings on the wall. So this is my ode to Botticelli. And then I would have announcements for the kids to come in the classroom. I still work at the museum. I've been there for 24 years in the education department. So whatever was happening, this was my contribution to Marie Sendak dying, you know, Where the Wild Things Are, because I imagined myself as being that little boy, you know, when that
was a wild thing.
my mom would have all these books around the house that I would look at, and they were fairies, but then it was like Where the Wild Things Are, you know, those kind of things. And so I found myself looking at these illustrations when I was younger, and my brother had a lot of comic books, but I wasn't really into them. I looked at the drawing, I didn't want to read it. So I was reading it visually. So, and this is another very large tribute I did to Frida Kahlo and her husband, that dude. And so I really, really enjoy drawing large. And again, as a draftswoman, this is my woman's work, if you would. And I often will be on Instagram under Sabrina Nelson 67, and I will tag woman's work, because for me, my grandmother and my great grandmother used to always ask me when I was in middle school and or on my way to high school, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they would say things like nurse, secretary, you know, and it was like these things that fit into this whole woman box. And I was like, and my mom would be like, come over here, you know. And so I didn't have I didn't have the notion of I'm going to get married one day and have a husband and I'm going to be a secretary or a nurse. My thing was, I'm not going to have no husband. I'm going to have some amazing kids and I'm going to be an artist. And I just didn't think of anything else. And so I'm apparently doing all of that. This was one of my traditional paintings that I did right out of college, where I was talking about Black spirituality and also children and seeds. So the pomegranate symbolizes the children, but also the akuba doll is given to women when they're pregnant with the hope that they will have a beautiful child. And so another really bad image here, but the digital collages. I often do private work or commissions for artists that I know that I've been introduced through Jessica. This is Divinity Rocks. She has an album that was out called I'm Possible or Impossible, where she asked me to do the album cover. And this,
Jessica Care More. Okay.
Yes, this is not Jessica. This is an artist that I was introduced to by Jessica. This is Divinity Rocks. And
Divinity Rocks. Okay, gotcha.
For Beyonce for many years. Now she's on her own label. And so she asked me to do a portrait for her album cover, and then the graphic designer and I collaborated. So you don't see all of the stuff around the edges, but you do see this image. 1 year, and I'm almost done. 1 year I spent the whole year doing only murals. So I enjoy working very large. I enjoy getting on scaffolding and a lift. And having the power to put it in a community that doesn't expect it. So this is in the north end of Detroit, not far from Motown Museum, or Rosa Parks, which used to be called 12th Street, over by one of the very first high schools in Detroit. This piece I wanted to put in honor of people in the community to have hope. And I wanted the Black man to represent that, because the building that I did it on is a small business owned by a Black man who owns a company called Rebound Construction. And his goal was to bring people out of the penal system and teach them how to work in the construction industry. So I have references in here of James Baldwin, Adinkra symbols, the heart to represent he's the hero and a peacekeeper, the Cadillac, you know, and then also the Blackbird and the broken chains in there. And so this is the actual, that was the initial painting that drawing I submitted, and then this is the actual mural. And even though it looks really small here, I probably am the height of not the first fist, but the second fist. So that'll give you an idea of scale. I really enjoy taking the graphic arts and putting it on a building. And then this was, at the same time, I was working with a print studio, letterpress studio downtown called Signal Return on a nonprofit print for Black family development. When my mother died in '79, a social services group called Black Family Development keeps children who are siblings, you know, together with their families. So they made sure that my grandmother and my aunt were able to legally adopt us. And so I wanted to do a piece in honor of them. And so this was the linoleum print. And those Black fists have Adinkra symbols, but for each color in the print, you have to carve another block. And so this is my process. And for me, when I'm making art, my process is the most exciting part of it. So it's not about the destination. For me, it's always the journey. Like me showing you that I'm sewing, me showing you that I'm painting, me showing you that the work is in progress. For me is the most exciting, and I still get excited over that. So this is the end piece. These pieces are still for sale. It is for sale at the Signal Return. So a percentage of it goes to Black family development because they are still in service for families. And so as a performance artist, I feel very Carrie Mae Weems here, by the way. Whatever excites me, I'm doing it. I don't feel like comfortable in one box. Like I'm not just gonna stand at an easel and paint. I'm not gonna sit at a board and just draw. I'm going to infuse myself, and I am going to sing, I am going to move, I am going to cry, I am going to create by any means necessary. And sometimes that means using my body. And so this is me in a sidewalk arts festival. I am the Blackbird, and this is where the song was used for sure again. And so there are Blackbirds that are in this space that are painted all over the walls. And this is my response to people getting killed violently by police officers in communities, and those folks not being held responsible. And so the hashtag is used, and there are doilies underneath the nest. Jennifer Harge is the performance artist who is the spirit, very much like Beloved. The spirit of that deceased child, bird, comes back to haunt us because we're not doing enough to protect them. And I am the Blackbird who says, like, just because I didn't have this child out of my belly does not mean that I don't hurt too. And so there are doilies underneath the nest, and there are pictures that I used to do of deceased children in the city and around the country. And then I started feeling really unhappy about doing that and sad about using their images from the media. And so they became then Blackbirds. On to the Baldwin series. I spent a year studying James Baldwin by drawing James Baldwin. And I had to leave the Blackbird series alone for a little bit because it became too much. And when I say too much, it started hurting. And so I just gave myself a break, but I also work for the College of Art. And when I work for the College of Art, I am traveling. So my laptop becomes my lap on the plane, and I carry sketchbooks everywhere. I am one of those artists who's been out of school for years. And I still have the practice of filling up sketchbooks because that is how I was conditioned. And it also keeps that muscle tight. So I was invited with Jessica Care-Moore to the James Baldwin Conference in Paris at the American University. And I was on this plane with all these folks from Detroit going to Paris. And I felt like I was on the short bus, only because I felt like they were Baldwinites. Like they knew so much about James Baldwin, and I knew about James Baldwin and Toni Morrison and all these other prolific writers, but I had not had enough information. So I crammed and read The Fire Next Time. And I'd already read Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me, and didn't even have the connection because like I said, I was so into my world, and my world is music and visual artists and literary arts, just a little bit. So for me, I had to baptize myself in James Baldwin. And so I drew images of him when I was there. I painted 2 images, and that's what I was invited to do. But when I got back, I just felt like I need to know more. So I started reading and drawing and drawing. And I ended up with over 92 drawings of James Baldwin, which became an obsession, if you would, because I feel like I baptized myself in his image, and I wasn't drawing him per se exactly how he looked, but I was drawing him based on what I was reading, based on the images, and based on the videos. And so I will share with you all some sketchbooks afterwards. But after James Baldwin, I returned to Blackbird. Yeah.
Before you move on from James Baldwin,
yeah,
I have a couple questions about James Baldwin. I saw, and there's a little sketch video that accompanies your invitation on Eventbrite that I posted. And
okay.
And I noticed in your sketchbook, I thought you were going to show more of that because we talked about that quite a bit. But I think that it was really interesting how your treatment of James Baldwin. We were talking about this yesterday, how a number of your pictures of James Baldwin take broad interpretation, but then others of them are spot on. They're James Baldwin. So what caused you to have that variance? Because in some of them it looks like, boom, that's James all the way. And in some of them it looks like you said, well, let me just imagine James as a younger person or in a different mood. Or how did you do that?
Well, so, as I was drawing him, I was also listening to his video recordings, depending on what was happening politically. This is when Trump was running. And I think he won. And when I was drawing this one, and I was like, what in the entire, I hope I'm not offending anybody, what the fuck? And so I was drawing James Baldwin, but I was also feeling James Baldwin. And so drawings were really in relation to how I felt about who he was at the moment and how he was coming through me spiritually. Mm-hmm. What's really strange is I wasn't born with a gap in my mouth, but all of a sudden started developing when I said, I'm turning into James Baldwin, I swear to God. After about 90 something drawings, I got a few prints made, and then I started using embroidery to stitch onto them. So I have all of my James Baldwin sketchbooks here, and it started out as a Inktober challenge, which means for the 31 days of October, you draw based on the drawing prompts, which I think are all whack. So my prompt was James Baldwin, and I stopped at 91 drawings.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. We're at 12 now. We said we were going to start taking questions from folks at this point. And, I'm sure Phil might have some questions that you may want to ask, but we have some folks that have actually made some comments. Emar loves the Baldwin.
The Blackbird images, and then you do the song?
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
Okay, let me show you.
Return to the Blackbird, yeah.
Yeah, let me just show a few of the Blackbird images and, kind of move from there. So, I returned back to the Blackbird because the world doesn't stop. And one thing that is constant in the world is change and death. And so I started working on a show at Madonna University called Why You Want to Fly, Blackbird. And so it ended up with about 2,000 pieces. I don't know why I can't just push the button to go next. Wrong. And so these are just a few of the works that ended up in the show. This is on vellum paper, where I'm doing the spirit of Blackbird, and then the movement of it, just kind of dealing with that. At the same time, still doing murals. So this is a mural in Eastern Market, which is our farmers market here in Detroit. And this is Grace Lee Boggs, Jessica Caremore, and Charity Hicks. I call myself an artivist. Grace Lee Boggs is certainly an activist, and Charity Hicks was an activist as well. She was fighting for water to be not shut off here in Detroit. And so I wanted to honor those women on the walls, because there's a lot of really pretty murals in our city, but I don't see a lot of murals that honor women who are doing work here. And so the two women who have the halos over them, this is Grace Lee Boggs, and it just says, you know, now is the time to grow our souls. And then Charity Hicks, her halo says wage love. And then Jessica's somebody's got to care more. And so just talking about those women who have lots of work that they did here in Detroit. This was a painting that I was commissioned to do by the Detroit Visitors Bureau, and it's got a lot of gold leaf, but it's an ode to techno music here. And so I did a techno being, if you would. And so it's not a traditional Sabrina, but I'm always about pattern and movement, and I'm always about music. So often if you step in my studio, you're gonna hear anything from Marvin Gaye, Aretha Franklin, and then you might hear Jay Dilla, and I'm okay with it, or Juan Atkins, or whoever. So this was from the Blackbird series, and this is talking about pain. And on all of my paintings, there is a black feather that is sewn onto them with gold leaf. This is from the series. This is a raven, and this is an ode to Gilda, but it is a meditation drawing, but it is also a black nest, if you would, or black hole. This is another Blackbird. And then this is me sewing pattern dresses. And here I'm talking about patterns, the patterns of flight, the patterns of birds, which is called a murmuration, depending on which type of bird it is, but also the idea that our families came from the South in the hope of better lives, and our birds and children are being killed. And so this was at the show. These are the dresses, and the belly is the womb, is the bird cage, which is our first home. And in the show, all of the bird cages were symbolically left open so that those souls, because Rumi says our children are of us, but they no longer belong to us once they're born. So this is just talking about the idea that our wombs are empty, those children are gone, and we have to mourn their loss.
Sabrina, I want to jump in here for 1 second. I'm looking and thinking, and this is what I'd love to hear you talk about the blackbirds. And we think of the blackbirds as kind of these spirit animals of people who carry intelligence, but here they're also documenters. They're watching. They're reflecting. Is this an extension to the way you take that kind of history of the blackbird, the symbolic energy of the blackbird, and kind of make it your own in a sense?
I feel like that is definitely true, Phil. Just thinking about how we, as beings, I call myself in my studio, I'm nesting always, right? I can't create something before I go in and I put paint over here, or I move pencils over there. So this is me nesting. This is me creating nests. These are hair nests. And when I think of women who go through trauma emotionally or physically, the first thing we do is pull our hair out, right? So the idea of using weave, or we just don't comb our hair. And my grandmother, I grew up in a house where like you comb your hair, you don't throw your hair out. You have to burn it, because if a bird gets it, you're going to go crazy or something bad will happen. And I was told this in the house. So I started using these weaves and wigs, and I started braiding and creating these nests that are known as our first homes, right? Where we put our eggs so that they're safe from predators, but we can't save them. And so I started making nests out of hair, and I made about 6 of them for the show, but this was in the studio before they made their way to the place that they ended up. But I wanted to talk about that whole Blackbird and black hair and women and how we deal with trauma. And so this is a mourning dress, if you would. And this is a gilded cage. And so our womb is like a gilded cage. It's a beautiful, safe space. And when they leave that womb, we have no control. And then I found this bodice. Somebody had thrown it out, but it was made in 1967. And I created an ode to all of the fledglings or the blackbirds that we're losing daily. This is a traditional painting that I did, a live painting. So sometimes my painting doesn't always look that I'm not doing in my studio, but doing for the public. So this is a performance painting that I did that people will definitely identify me as a colorist with. So I'm not one to be put in this box, but right now I'm just focusing on the Blackbird because I'm not finished saying what I need to say visually. All right, I'm gonna stop talking. I'm done.
Fantastic, fantastic. So should we open it up? Should we get some people in here? And we'd love to open it up to the floor and have people join in and talk with Sabrina about some of the work and some of the things that we've been listening to and engaged in. How should we do this, Drake? How should we get
if somebody wants to type in the comment section, I'll open up your mic, or you can open up your mic or raise your hand. There's a if anybody wants to say anything.
Oh, there's so many things in the group chat.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I look at some of the, somebody says, I love her colors box. Captivating images, love, love, love. Umar says he loves the long raven. Deeply felt presentation. So you know, Sabrina, you've done great. I want to, you know what? Because like I told you, I said, you know, it's a spoil of riches when you can actually draw. You can be a visual artist and sing. I didn't think, I was like, Sabrina, but you know, I'm gonna play this for everybody, you know, just so they can hear it. And you know, I
wanted to be an opera singer when I was little. Like I was looking at Leontine Price, like, listen, I can do this. I swear to God, I can do it. Grandmother and great grandmother told me I was crazy for just stop all that yelling. And so you know, my sewing and music. Let me see.
You all can hear it, right?
You did something. It's low now.
It's low? You don't hear that? No?
It's weird. It's going in and out. I think you should put the link in for later. It's just really weird.
Then I guess it's not what, you know, virtual presentations have their limitations.
Right. Well, so I used to sing, I used to record, and I went to the Harmony Park studio, and I was in a singing group in the 80s, and that's when I realized I don't want to do that. It's not my thing. But I think I can hold a note. I'm okay in a note. Not my
Sabrina, one thing I see, and I do want to say this, and I've said this from the moment that you and I started having conversation, is you know, some artists look at it almost they not to say they aren't committed artists or committed to their craft, but there's a kind of suit wearing to it. They put on their suit as an artist and then they go and create. Don't see that with you at all. And so it did surprise me with the singing. There's a very organic out loud of the art itself. And would you describe yourself in that way? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I don't think, you know, when I was little, people used to ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? And my answer was always, I don't want to be a secretary. I don't want to be a housewife. I don't want to be a nurse. And I would pick these things because my great grandmother and grandmother used to say them to me. And not that they weren't womanist, but, you know, for my great grandmother, that's all she knew. Right. And so I just wanted to make stuff, and whatever made me happy made me happy. And I didn't know about the idea of being a doctor, lawyer. You know, I wanted, in my head, I wanted to travel, and I wanted to do whatever made me breathe hard. And for me, that was, you know, dressing up a certain way. And I am my first canvas, and drawing and making. And, you know, when I made things, it would be like my mouth would water, right? Wasn't really doing it for the attention of everybody else, but it just set me on fire, if you would. And I don't feel like that fire has gone out. So I don't know about putting on the suit and taking off the suit. Like, it's just a way of who I am. I'm wired this way. I don't know how not to be, you know, people are like, you're so creative, you're so artsy. And I'm like, oh, I'm so Sabrina, thanks.
We have Judy wants to ask you a question.
Oh, hey, Judy. Hey, Priscilla.
Hey,
Sabrina. Judy, you're my favorite artist. You're my favorite collage artist. And I have my digital collages, but I have collages, and I'm like, Judy is here.
Well, listen, you know, I'm just getting into this. I've been doing this for 5 years now. And so to see you and to hear your story, I am so glad that I had this opportunity. And when I see you on Facebook or in person, you just amaze me. I mean, your whole persona, you're just so artsy. And I love that about you. I love that about you. And I love that you are who you are. You wear what you want to wear. You say what you want to say. You are one of those role models. For me, you know, I consider myself a babe, and you're my elder, although I know that I'm older than you. But but that's how I feel about you. You are a model for me to be who you are, no matter what people say or how they expect you to act, but be who you are. And I love your work, and I love your story. So you are my role model.
Thank you, Judy. I think I went through the fire with my sister and my family, like being the middle child, if you would, and coming out the house with polka dots and stripes on, and they'd be like, what's wrong with her? You know, like, why she? And then having these drawings, like for everybody's birthday, I would always make these paper dolls or these cards, and I would always draw stuff for them, and they'd be like, yep, she's definitely different. So I don't think they blocked me. I never got in anybody's way, you know, and as long as I was quietly doing what I was doing, I was okay. If I wasn't, I didn't need to go to no hospital. I wasn't hurting nobody. Just leave her alone. And for me, it was my way to it was a sanctuary, if you would, also a church, and it also kept me safe.
Yeah.
Be inside myself.
Sabrina, we also have Lakila Brown has a question for you as well.
Lakila, let me get my copy, girl. Let's do it. Yes.
Well, I just wanted to say, you know, you were talking about like Gilda, and I remember like you were very much for me what Gilda was for you, in the sense that like we both went to Detroit public schools, and like I didn't even know art school was a thing. I went to CCS too, like Sabrina, but like you were the first person I ever saw, and I had, like you kind of said about Gilda, this moment of recognition when I met you, like, oh, like that's what I am. Like when cause I was like, oh, I don't know like what I am or what I'm doing. And then I met you and I was like, oh, I'm one of those. That's what I am. And then like I met Gilda, and it was the same kind of thing. And I think also I put you in my work, the way that you put Gilda in your work. And I think, you know, I think about her all the time. I have her paintbrush mounted on my wall.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah, I have a paintbrush. It's like encrusted with encaustic that she used. But I was just wondering, it's so funny. There's so much energy. I live in Brooklyn, but I'm from Detroit, born and raised, went to Detroit public schools. But I was just wondering, like, how we can, I mean, I know you do this work already. You go out and you talk to young people all the time, and like, you like help me get my portfolio together, apply and stuff. But I'm just wondering about like putting more of that energy out into the city in general, and also like how we overcome like fear of creativity, and just like, especially for like young Black people, and in a spaces, in these like, you know, once you working really professionally, we have Black spaces and stuff, but you know, the art world can be really white and stuff. But I'm just wondering, other than just going out and like the way you do, like, if you can just
so for me, I am in some of the helping with students understand, you know, I've worked with Jessica in a few public schools, helping them understand how artists live and how you can have a voice and how you don't have to go and work in corporate America if you really are going to be authentic and true to yourself as a creative. So showing them people like Tylan Sora, like Lakila Brown, like Sydney James, people that maybe or like Mario Moore, who they can relate to, but showing them that, you know, there are people like me or Richard Lewis or folks that I went to school with that are still practicing artists. And, you know, when I'm talking to parents and they're like, you know, aren't they gonna be a starving artist? And I'm like, there's a lot of starving lawyers and business people. And so, you know, I got back fat if that's what you want to see. But you have to learn how to be your own brand and your own business person, and to believe in what you're doing and be your authentically true self. So, you know, just teaching them that it's okay to be an artist. It's okay to really study and practice and figure out how to make your practice and your product desired by other people so that they can support you as an artist. Whether it's a commission by a corporation, or, you know, you're doing commercial work, or whatever keeps you floated so that you can maintain your practice. And so I do that often by going into high schools and middle schools and talking to them about creative careers and creative capital. And so just being that person that they witness. And then I have to take my sketchbooks with me because they can't hear me just by talking. Like I walk in the door and I'm like, what y'all got? This what I got. Can you hear me now? And for the visuals, you know, that's how they hear you. They hear you by, you know, the proof of what you're doing, and like how you share with them, how you can say to them, I'm one of you, and if you want to follow my path, here's how you do it. And so I'm primarily talking to Black and brown students in the cities. So in DC, in Florida, in Detroit, and letting them know that you can do it. You just have to believe in yourself.
Yeah, because I just want to make sure that I'm always trying to find ways to make sure that I see more of us in these spaces when I go to openings and stuff, and I don't want it to feel like we're doing this thing that they can't touch or be a part of.
Right, and it doesn't have to be a white cube space like a gallery, you know, which can tend to be a very, you know, invited in space, but murals, public murals in neighborhoods, you know, when you're on the scaffolding and a kid walks by and they're asking you questions, being open to saying, hey, here's what's happening, and here's why, and here's how I got here. Was it Ann who had a question?
You know what? Yeah, John Hogan had a question, and he was saying, is there a place in the city if for somebody visiting, do you have a listing of your murals, the listing of addresses where your murals might be located?
I do. The power man, or the hero, if you would, or the savior, peace man, is in North End, Detroit, and it's on Kenilworth and John R. So it's in a sort of, I want to say everything is always upcoming in Detroit. We are the Phoenix, right? We're the rising bird. The three Graces, if you would, with Grace Lee Boggs, Jessica, and Charity, is in Eastern Market, which is Farmers Market. There are 2 murals that have been destroyed. Recently, You Are Loved Here has been torn down because the building itself has been redone. And then the one on the street of Jefferson and Woodward had to be redone because people just flocked to it and it just got worn out. And so it was sun rays. And so I can give a mapping of the mural, but if you follow my Instagram page under Sabrina Nelson 67 and hashtag Sabrina Nelson art, everything is there because I like to document my process, not necessarily always the finished work, but like you'll see shavings from my prints, or lines, because I'm always talking about, everything is in art, from the way that we live to the way that we eat and our practice.
But one thing, Sabrina, I think it's important to say that that people who don't know, your son, Mario Moore, a fantastic young artist and such, and how this kind of works in this transition of generations. Now you took from your forebears, and now you've given rise, I'm not sure that's the right language, but you've given rise to this wonderful, beautiful artist. How do you create such a thing? What part would you say other people can play in the creation of an artist that's intimate? Because it's difficult sometimes for creative people to, intimate level, to have discourse and feel each other's thinking to a certain degree. So what's in that?
Well, I infuse myself in young communities with middle school and high schoolers, and I'm often asked to come in on career day and talk about being a fine artist and what's that like. With my children, with Denise, Mario, and Sudani, everything that I did and still do in my life is involved in creative communities and creative capital. And so there was never a time I didn't take them with me. Like Mario met Amir Baraka, and he drew a picture of him when he was about 9. And Amir, he signed it. He was like, "Hey, my brother." He gave him dap and everything. He's like, "Give me 5, And then he did on the black hand side thing. And he was like, "What you want to be when you grow up?" And Mario was like, "I'm an artist." Showed him the portrait that he drew of him while he was standing at the podium, and he was like, "My man!" And he was like, "Can I sign it?" So I have a drawing that Mario did at 9 years old of Amir Baraka, who was here in Detroit at Wayne State speaking. I have a drawing of Gwendolyn Brooks that I drew of her, and I would take my children with me when they would come because I'm interested in all forms of art. So from the literary arts to watching Bill T. Jones dance, or going to see the Harlem dancers, because that excites me. And then it also gives me food for thought for what am I saying as an artist? And am I, like Nina Simone says, of an artist is to reflect the times. Am I doing that? And how do they live? And looking at my tribe, if you would, of writers and dancers and performers, am I paying it forward? Am I writing these letters as James Baldwin wrote to his nephew? Here's what to expect in the world. And what will my legacy be? And so if I am not famous in that way, my goal is to be a light that is a match that lights other lights. And if that has happened with Lakila, if that has happened with Mario, with other people who are around me in the community that I work in, whether it's in the middle school, the high school, in the museum, or in the College of Art, where I am. Like my first time seeing Mario at Yale in his graduate program, I went to a pit crit, which happens to be this critique that they have. And I don't know that he knew that I was coming, but I look over and they're all standing in this circle and I'm on the floor above, but they're down at the bottom. And I see Mario, and then I see a couple other people look up and they're like, Sabrina Nelson? And then the instructor's name is Will Villalango, who was recruiting at one time for Cooper Union. So we've been on the road with each other, but I didn't know he was teaching at Yale. And so I see these black and brown people down in this pit, and I'm thinking Mario gonna be in school with all these little white folks with money. And he ain't. It's like black and brown folks just in this little circle. And then at least 5 of them I had met when they were in high school, either in DC, in New York, in Maryland, or Florida. And they were like, Sabrina Nelson is your mama? You know, and so I touch people, they remember, and then they move into the world, and then we become peers, because I'm just gonna be everywhere. And I'm okay with that. And you have a question, so I wanna honor that.
Hi, I'm actually,
Hey,
hi, I'm Mary. It was more of a comment. I'm a social worker for the Boston Public Schools, and I was a dancer. I did ballet for 12 years, so I was that black girl who people were like, you do what? When I was in high school. But there were a couple of things that you mentioned that sort of caught me, and it was when you said that you were brilliant, but your school was too loud, and that all the noise was keeping you from learning. So it just made me think, you know, how many of our schools are just too loud for our kids to really think and hear themselves. So I just wanted to mention that because it's sort of, I think it's gonna stick to me, and in every school building I walk into from now on, I'm going to be thinking about that, because I do believe that, you know, Boston has so much talent, but it's overlooked.
There too, you guys have amazing talent.
Oh my goodness. I mean, the painting that I have behind me was someone that I met at an art show, and when I walked in, I was like, oh, he's legit. I gotta buy that.
I like it. Listen guys, that whole, I'm legit, buy my stuff.
Yeah. No, and I literally, I was just like, I gotta figure out how to buy that. And he was probably shocked that I bought it, but I was like, wow. But it's something to remember, because, you know, sometimes that kid who's in the corner, you might think, you know, what's going on, but they just can't hear themselves. And I think,
yeah, and I just want to say I'm definitely a product of Detroit Public Schools. And at the time when I was in the high schools in the late 70s was middle school, and then in 80, I went right into high school. And so it was crowded. It was a lot going on. The crack pandemic was happening. My neighborhoods were dying. The people who lived there that I knew as neighbors were leaving, right? And so, and my family was going through all kinds of stuff. And so I couldn't hear myself think. And I don't know that we had the overcrowding, but there were some teachers in my high school who really cared. I went to Cooley High School. And then there were others who didn't. That was a job for them to come in and sit there and babysit us. And so I was, it was just so much noise that was going on. You know, it was, when I got into the maternity school, I could hear myself think. And there were questions that were asked from the teachers, and I would just blurt out the answer, and I'd be like, well, am I possessed? Where'd that come from? And so it was interesting to be in 2 different spaces, one that was full of chaos where I didn't have art, and the other one where I was one of the only of 7 kids in the classroom. And then I realized too, now an afterthought, that I'm a right brain visual thinker. So you have to teach individually each child if you have the opportunity, the way that they learn. And I learned visually. So I didn't know that then. I was just taught how the teacher taught. And so, and then I didn't have art, so there was no
outlet.
There was no outlet, right? So my outlet was putting on my what we used to call Walkman. You all don't understand it. But I would put on my Walkman and I would just be in my head, and I would be listening to, you know, Prince, The Time. I was listening to jazz. I was listening to Nancy and Aretha and just stuff that people wasn't, I was listening to opera. People wasn't into that. And then I was listening to Hall and Oates, so I was in my 80s head, and then I would listen to Pink Floyd and, rocking out. And they'd be like, well, oh yeah, you want the different ones. And drawing on my lined paper in my math classroom. And so I couldn't stop drawing. And so it was just my, how people say your love language, it was my language.
Well, Sabrina, we want to, we have come to the bewitching hour, if you will, the 12:30 mark. And
okay, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for coming. Cheeto, I see you. Judy, thank you. Francesca, everybody, I love y'all.
And I'm glad to have my mom on here. My mother is another fantastic artist. She's muted.
Can I say something?
Birthday.
You're muted. Hold on. Okay. Say it now. Hold on, Mom. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Don't touch nothing. Yes.
Oh, well, hey, girl, you know what? I love this story. Sabrina knows this story, how we met, right? I was a brand new artist. I met Sabrina by way of Drake and Marlo Studebar at MASH Detroit. So anyway, Marlo had asked me to put all these paintings up around his facility for his soft opening. And then he asked me later to just leave the paintings up. So not knowing that Sabrina and Jessica Care Moore were collaborating on some, is it Rebel Women exhibit?
Black Women Rock.
Yeah, right. So anyway, like I said, I didn't know who Sabrina was, who you were. So I'm looking at you doing some kind of, to me, it looked like a weird installation of going, what is this lady all about, right? And from there, she was curating the show, and she accepted 2 or 3 of my paintings into the show. I'm going, wow, that's only because of Drake, the relationship. Wait a minute. So anyway, I said, this lady is phenomenal. Even during that time that you were installing the exhibit, I could tell that Sabrina was profound. She had a depth of knowledge, not only about visual arts, but art history, about American history. So she is really dynamic. So now she's a household word. And I'm glad I got to meet you. Because
Thank you so much. I'm called Denise's mama, Mario's mama, and Sudney's mama. And every now and then I'm called Sabrina Nelson.
And
excellent presentation. Really enjoyed it.
And there's so many other artists on here. Thank you, Mom. There's so many other artists on here as well that I just want to give a shout out to, including my mother and mom. Thank you very much. Richard Lewis is on here. Emar Hutchins is back. I think we have, is Carlos on here, our featured artist for next week?
I believe Carlos Nunez is here.
He's here.
Fantastic artist and leader of the arts in Boston.
Yes. And then, of course, Lakila. So we're just so happy, and Judy. And
special thanks to Anna.
Anna has been on it. Anna, we've been communicating. You're on point. You're gonna have we'll have to give you a gold key to
Drake.
Pat Baker.
Patricia Baker is trying to talk, and she wants to let everyone know that I found this studio visit phenomenal. Sabrina knows how to engage her audience. She's articulate, yet at times raw. But her visual representations, everything that she showed a depth of knowledge. And I commend you, and you are going to make me do more research.
All right.
Well, everybody, you know what? If you have until we meet again, let's Sabrina, round of applause. Phil, round of applause.
Hi, Phil.
Give yourselves a round of applause. And until we meet again, everybody, please stay safe. And if you have one handy, put it on. We're going to take a picture.
Oh, let me get mine. Let me get mine, Drake.
Oh,
I got
Drake. You should
got
have
it
said
ready.
something.
I got it ready. Wait a minute. Hold up.
Wait.
Oh.
All right. This is a pair of underpants.
All right. Are we ready?
Ready? We are next week. Peace.
And this is how we have to roll. Now, if anyone is interested in purchasing the print, you'll have to reach out to Signal Return. But I will have some printed work, and Drake will put that information in.
I'll email it back out. I'll email it to everyone.
Thank you guys so much, Mary. I love your mask and your shirt. It's happening. For coming, I appreciate you. And Francesca and the whole CCS community, Therese and Brandy and everybody who I can't see your pictures, but thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Be well, and stay in. If you're in Georgia, I'm sorry. But not really.